The Brooklyn Nets welcome in the Dallas Mavericks to the Barclays Center and battle them all the way to overtime, coming up just short in the end, 129-125. We talk about what was an epic battle of superstars in the NBA, what went well, what was improved, and some rotational little wrinkles that maybe we can build upon as we move forward. We break down an epic game on a Thursday night coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there, you're going to find Doug Norrie. He's the owner-operator of DFSR. For all your daily fantasy sports rankings from DraftKings to FanDuel, he's got you covered. I'm Adam Arbrecht, breaking down the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast with my boy, Andy Mack. We thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms, and let you know, today's episode is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, it's where the game starts. And Doug, where we start is with what I can't put it any other way, was a great, entertaining, exciting, competitive game of basketball that unfortunately the Brooklyn Nets do not come out on the winning side of, losing in overtime 129-125 to the Dallas Mavericks.
Yeah, anytime you get to overtime, it really, really sucks to not walk away with the W. Obviously, this game was as close as it can get. Obviously, tied through regulation. You can't get any closer than that. We're going to talk about some of the things that didn't go so great with the Nets, talk about some of the things that, probably were slight improvements. But just on a high level, it's just a bummer. They not only say desperately need this game because it's only 5 games into the season, but you would have liked it. It just feels better to be 2-3 instead of 1-4. It's at home. Yeah, you're facing against Luka. Yeah, he's one of the top 5 at worst best players in basketball, something like that. And he put on a show. And they were in this basically right until the very end, except for a few just kind of missteps in overtime, right? And there's some other things that Dallas did that this was definitely like Dallas won the game. I didn't think Brooklyn lost it. I don't know if that meant in the, when we look at the scoreboard at the end and when we look at the standings at the end, it's not going to say, a loss instead of the other team beat us kind of thing. I get it goes down as an L, but in general, it's tough to be too heartbroken, except for just the result is like, that sucks. You would really, really like to walk away from a game that you scrap your way all the way into overtime only to just lose. And that's just kind of what happened. So overall, hate the result, but in terms of just like watching a good basketball game, that was a pretty damn good basketball game.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk about the performance of Kyrie Irving here in a minute, Kevin Durant, and then did we see steps forward? Did we see progress from Ben Simmons in this game? There's also some rotational pieces that we'll talk about, but just specifically in the overtime, where this game ended, a couple of closeouts, a couple of rotational switches there. I mean, really, 3 straight possessions, 3 3-pointers from not just Luka, but also Bullock. Spencer Dinwiddie was involved in this action in this game as well. And when you get down 9 in a 5-minute overtime, you kind of start to see the writing on the wall there a little bit. But the Brooklyn Nets had a couple of chances. You had Kyrie on the wing. You had Kevin Durant on the wing. Those shots don't fall. Heavy lift for them in this one, obviously, and that's not an excuse. It's the expectation. So you come up a little bit short. But just to your point, as far as the game overall, and I think
real quick, let me just jump in and say one thing, just to not push past that. They had, and just to make sure we don't skip past it, they did have good looks here in the overtime.
Yes.
You mentioned the Kyrie shot from the nail was wide open. The KD shot the 3 was wide open, and I mean, for him, it's wide open. Those will probably go down more than not, over the course of a season. They just didn't go here, and they were momentum shifting pieces in the overtime. Like, they desperately needed those shots. If you get those looks in overtime, you have to have them go in, especially if the other team is shooting like white hot from the sun from 3-point line from beyond the arc. So yeah.
And the other pieces too, just the 2 things are, one, and it doesn't matter, losses are losses, but as we always talk about on the podcast, if the process is correct, you've used this phrase a lot. Just because the shot doesn't go down doesn't mean it wasn't the right play. Doesn't mean that everything wasn't done correctly before the shot goes in or does not go in. The other piece, I think, too, as you mentioned at the top there, is if this was the first game of the season and the Nets lost in this fashion, I think we'd be feeling almost elated based on everything that we're coming into the season with, right? All the questions that we have about how this team is going to look. Because it's game number 5 and you lose it and you're now 1-4 on the season, it does have a little bit of a different weight to it. But if we're going to try to stay true to our mantra for this season, I think, especially early days, we're not going to overreact to these losses, and we're going to try to look at the things that weren't improved in this one. I feel vastly different after this game than I did after the previous, right? That is a fact statement that you feel much better about what you saw tonight.
Well, this could have really gone sideways. I remember they're on a back-to-back here, right? This is a tough back-to-back. It's a home and away back-to-back. It's coming from Milwaukee to play against Luka and company back at home. So you get back home, but you still play 2 games in 2 nights where they had sort of max effort against the Bucks. This easily could have been drummed up as a schedule loss. I didn't just assume it would be, but I kind of even contemplated whether it would be kind of smart to maybe just rest some guys here rather than just go max effort. And, ultimately they didn't do that. And that probably is a little premature. But point being, this is like they could have easily rolled over on this one just from the scheduling standpoint. It's hard to play these back-to-backs. The other team is fresh and you lost a tough one the night before. We see it all the time in the NBA where you just kind of take an L on those. And it's sort of sometimes even expected. I know probably some fans will go ballistic with that, but that's just sometimes the way of the road with the NBA. They didn't do that. Like they threw a bunch of new bodies out here, new kind of just totally new looks. Some guys that hadn't even seen the court that we got probably decent-ish minutes out of. They're still down 2 shooters, which they, again, desperately need one of these guys in Harris and Curry to be able to play. Not having either is brutal. But really, just like I said, back-to-back, travel, a lot of minutes the night before in a very physical game against Giannis and those group. Like this is a really, really bad spot just from the scheduling standpoint. And to drag this team all the way to overtime is a good effort. The effort was for sure there. We've worried about the team, the effort at times from this team, like, wondering about the third quarter, wondering about coming out flat. I don't really think any of that happens here. I thought like the effort wise, this was just a really good game. They just had problems with one of the very best players in basketball, and that is just going to happen from time to time. So overall, like from an effort standpoint, you can't really knock them.
No, and another note that was made on the broadcast by Ian Eagle I think I don't know if this is the first game of the season. I'm trying to remember because I think they had a national game there, and I had to watch one in a fluky scenario to start the season too. First time I got to hear Ian Eagle calling the game on the YES Network, and he noted, I think in the pregame, this is the only time this season that the Brooklyn Nets will have a 5-game stretch where they will play all playoff teams from the year prior. And that's not, has nothing to do with an excuse about the record and winning or losing games. But in terms of the start of the season, with everything they have coming in, we talked about this last episode. This now makes 4 out of 5 teams where you have an elite superstar talent that you're going up against. The Brooklyn Nets have superstar talents of their own. So again, it's not like you shouldn't be able to go toe to toe. And then on your piece that you mentioned there, as well in terms of effort and energy. I think that's one thing that we can also say from a very high level here before we talk about individual performances. We were very critical about why is this team coming out somewhat sluggish to start games, the last 2 losses, the first quarter is just kind of being lackadaisical. We didn't even mention this last episode. Kevin Durant being careless with the basketball to start that last game, had 4 or 5 turnovers before he had his first basket of that game. Didn't see that in this one, came out with high energy. And then likewise, third quarter, although Doug did officially jinx them by saying, is it possible the Nets win a third quarter? They did not, but they came out of halftime. Yeah, they came out of halftime looking much better, far more dialed in overall in this game. And again, I know that fans are going to say, what are we talking about? Dialed in for a team with this type of talent? This isn't me saying, hey, don't worry about it. They gave a lot of effort. But this is where we are in terms of evaluating this team right now. Another 5-10 games, it's going to turn from love the effort, need to be producing wins here.
Yeah, again, it's hard to sometimes know how to react to games like this, right? Because on the one hand, I felt deflated, right? You feel deflated after an overtime loss, and there's just no way around it. It's just the feeling. You tune into these games, you root for the Nets or whatever your team is. I mean, if you're here, it's the Nets, to see W's. And especially from a team like this with high expectations, starting 5 games in to have 4 of them losses feels deflating. It's just one of those things where this is, again, where you have to kind of say to yourself, it's an 82-game season. we've seen marginal improvements at times, and the effort was good. I don't know. I want to talk about KD, Kyrie. I want to talk about Simmons. I mean, Simmons frankly saved the game for them late here. It was a sort of a different look from Simmons overall in this game. A ton of just totally different looks in terms of rotations and some other stuff that Nash and company did. First,
we may have learned some stuff out of this game too, as well. Not to cut you off, sorry.
Well, you did cut me off, but it's okay, because right now I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You're over there on Prize Picks. You're making entries. You're not worried about salary cap. That's because over on Prize Picks, you're just going more or less on a player's projection. If it's basketball, they got every sport, but if it's basketball, more or less on points, rebounds, assists. You pick your favorite players, pick some of the guys down further on the bench too. Prize Picks is going to just put their money up where the mouth is, and you're going to be able to do the same, not trying to fit those salaries. It's just really the way daily fantasy should have been imagined from the beginning. Prize Picks has figured it out, because all you do is you can go 10x on your money up with any entry just by picking 2 to 5 players if they're going to go more or less on that Prize Picks projection. And like I said, the Nets well. Some of the teams are going to play well. Just go in there. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic for this game. If you took the overs on all of them, you're walking away with Prize Picks money. You go download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and you're going to play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive 100% instant deposit match up to $100. Got to use the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. You can figure out the rest of the math. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy.
All right, pipe down, Doug. I'm going to cut you off again here. Let's get into it. No. So just to back it up here and talk about the individual performances, one thing that I'm just going to caveat here as well, because we saw a lot of this conversation coming out of the last couple of games. Kevin Durant playing 38 minutes, big minutes for him and Kyrie. This one, they obviously go over 40 because they're going to play that 5-minute overtime session as well. The one thing I just want to push away to the side here very quickly is that's what's going to happen. Your best players are going to play a lot of minutes, especially early in the season. You need to stop having this mentality that we're concerned about what's going to happen and how these guys are going to look late in the year. That is for middle of the season time, when you figured out some of the issues and you're locking up some W's. That's when you can sacrifice games. Nets can't afford to do that right now. And we look inside this game where Kyrie Irving gave you an all-time performance, man. He put together a highlight reel that fills up most players' careers. I'm not even saying that jokingly. There are players in the league that would have taken the 7 or 8 highlight reel moments from Kyrie's game tonight and been like, thank you. That might be enough for a Hall of Fame resume. I mean, he did every single vintage, trick that we were so used to seeing from him, but he did them. And at points, he was doing them on kind of like back-to-back possessions. He was fully in his bag for big stretches throughout this game.
Yeah, 39 points on 14 of 31 shooting, 5 for 14 from 3, got to the line 6 times. Also got on the boards again. That's a couple games in a row. He's got 15 rebounds combined over the last couple games. That does seem to be something that they are working with to be able to spark transition. But yeah, in terms of what you get from Kyrie, this is just, this is kind of what we missed all the beginning of last year with all the nonsense that went on with him, right? This is the reason, one of the reasons among whatever you got upset about with that was for a fact that when he's on the court, the guy is something like a human highlight reel when it comes to handles and finishing around the basket and just getting his shots. When he really gets rolling with it, it does look like it looks like an NBA version of the Harlem Globetrotters. It doesn't look like the Globetrotters as the way that they actually play, but it's like the NBA version of it because it just is like an and one tape.
I prefer it to be like the Harlem Globetrotters where it was predetermined that they'd be winning. The Nets are the Harlem Globetrotters.
Yeah, where they just smoke the Generals every game. That would be nice too. They could do that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, so you get these Kyrie Irving games. And one of the bummers too about this game is, and this will happen during the season just because they are so top heavy in terms of their overall talent, is that when you get these great games and these games also go down as L's, it does sting a little bit more also. Because it's like, hey, excuse me, I'm getting choked up about this Kyrie performance.
It always does, man. It always does.
He drops almost 40 and he's, he's going into takeover mode in the third quarter and whatnot. Also kind of so locked in on the defensive end too. He got thrown in against Luka a ton in this game. They tried individual. We'll get to this in a little bit. They threw a lot of just one looks at Luka and just that was the way they played. And that's an interesting way to take it. That assignment became Kyrie a lot, whether by sometimes just on a switch, sometimes just on the pickup. And he came away with like 4 steals, 3 blocks. Like, he's so active on the defensive end. And just to get all that game from him and not have it again turn into a W is another one that you're like, because you just don't get that all the time. I know Kyrie's a really special player. He's among the most fun in all of the NBA to watch. But that also is not going to happen every night, right? And so you hope then it does, that they come out with a win, and that's just another part of part of this game that ends up stinging.
And one of the things too, I think, not to diminish, it's not diminishing his performance and Kevin Durant. Like, we had this little run there late in the game where both of them were on, and they're taking their turns on the offensive end, possession by possession. That's, I think, maybe that's kind of the next thing that we need from them, is we need them to both be kind of on a heater simultaneously, where you don't know where it's coming from. And even though you can say, well, yeah, but as long as Kyrie's going up 3-4 possessions in a row and knocking down daggers, what difference does it make? I do think that the consistent threat level from everyone all the time is what creates some of that ease of offense, and also creates a lot of real dangerous moments for some of your supporting cast members, who we'll talk about here in a minute. Beyond Ben Simmons, other guys, there's a bit of a revelation here happening for me and Royce O'Neal. I already put it out there. First round pick, totally worth it. Might have been worth a second round pick thrown in there too at this point with the way that he's coming out and playing. But Kyrie gives you a great performance, as he said. Kevin Durant, again, we always talk about him being ho-hum. 12 of 21 by the end of this, 2 of 5 from deep, gets to the line 11 times, doesn't miss from there either, and also throws in 5 assists to go along with 2 steals and a block. I'll lump that in with the Kyrie Irving piece you mentioned here. Both of them are playing defensive basketball, I think, at a much I don't say higher level, because they always can, but more dedicated level, I'll say, to start the season, which in some ways makes the fact that they're losing these games a little bit frustrating, because I do think, even though there have been issues in the consistency, more specifically on the offensive end, you'd like to see them get rewarded for the defensive effort, because we've talked about how that engine there can help facilitate the offensive end. And I'd like to see them getting some wins here, because then it cements the idea there is value there. Don't shut that part of your game off.
Yeah, these guys combined for 76 points. It's just another. They put the team on their back when it comes to the scoring.
That should be enough.
And it's funny too, because when you talk about maybe sometimes trading baskets and stuff, there were a couple sequences late that just didn't also go the Nets' way. There was a kick ball on a Kyrie drive that was like clearly a kick. They didn't call it. Yeah. And then in the very next possession, KD got fouled going up for the shot, and they didn't call that either. And those are those little things that just that when they go wrong, especially for your best players, is going to be tough to overcome. Now, you want to go the other way and say, hey, that one pass, the slip pass that Luka sent actually went off Royce's leg. Yeah, it did too. And so maybe some of the universe just evens itself out with all that stuff. But
I was ready to go red lightning if that goaltending call was upheld against Kevin Durant.
Yeah, you were going to see a computer get launched like from like a trebuchet of my arm. That was gonna I
was like, in real time, I don't know what you're seeing here, and I was like, okay, you guys got it sorted out there. I expected maybe another Steve Nash ejection coming in.
But when you take your 2-star players and then you just kind of get these little things that in the end don't go that way either, it's like, and where you can point to it too. You can point to these like very specific moments where it's like, it would have been nice to get the call. I think that overall officiating was fine in this game, but just in general, it goes to show again. In the NBA, you really need the role players again for the 18th time. They really need, especially with some of the lineups that we'll talk about here in a second. Like, they needed Joe Harris or Seth Curry so bad in this game tonight. They don't have it, and you'll see, I think, when those guys come back, less of this hero ball that these guys probably feel like they need to play, because the spacing will get X% better. But when it comes down to just a superstar league, when your 2 superstars just have a couple things that go wrong for them late in the game, just because of sort of bad luck or, the ref missed a call or whatever, it's just going to be magnified even more because they're your best players. Right. And they're the ones that you want everything to go right for. And when everything does go right, you're going to win the game. And that's just kind of tells the story of what happened here.
I have a quick follow-up thought on that, but here in a second, we'll talk about Ben Simmons' game, talk about Royce O'Neal, some of these other role players. And then, as you mentioned, are we learning something here? And what does the absence of Joe Harris and Seth Curry, what would that impact have been? It's not just that there's the 3 points. We understand that, but what is it beyond that? We'll break that all down here in a second, right after we remind you that we thank you, as we do at the top of the show and every show, for making the Locked On Nets podcast your first listen of the day. For your second listen, though, why don't you check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast? From the games that matter to the most, to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and beyond and behind the scenes with our local experts. They'll do a much better job telling you all those narratives than I've done with this right now, but they're going to give you those insights that only the Locked On Network can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on the App Store, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast needs fulfilled. So just quickly there, the one thing you mentioned there was you want everything to go right for your superstars. And if it does, then you can get the win. I think there is something in that of just saying, now when things aren't always going perfectly, it's still really good when your superstars find the way to get the win, right? And we've seen this, by the way, from Kevin Durant and Kyrie. They've had sluggish first halves and then come on in third and fourth quarters, and they try to give you that resurgent performance. And often last year we would talk about how, man, because you had to go 1,000 miles an hour for 18 straight minutes, by the time you get down to those final sequences, sometimes you don't have enough left in the tank. So something obviously that we want to just see the Nets get the reward for putting in the effort and the results. Ben Simmons here, +1. How about that, friends? He did it. He's only -44 now for the season. This was a game, though, that I thought we got a better sample size. Now, there were some times when he did a little bit better job attacking at the basket. There were times when he was still timid in the process. However, he got into the lane a little bit quicker. And even though I think he avoided taking some of the shots when he should have, he still was quicker and then more decisive in getting the ball out of his hands. And that is as important as anything. And we saw early in the first and second quarters of this one, especially, where there were really good quick ball movement sequences where Kevin Durant was dumping it down to Ben in the paint. And even if it was that little drop-off pass, it was a quick snap decision, get the ball out of your hands and give a great opportunity for a foul or a shot to go up. It's not the perfect version, but it was a step forward for Ben, certainly on the offensive end.
He looked considerably more comfortable. There were, obviously he airballed a floater. You don't love to see that, but I actually don't even care because you said it last episode. Just take the shot. Just take the shots. Like get in the lane and take the shots they will start going in. Like it's going to be a timing thing and it's going to be a confidence thing. But he has to keep trying. Now it's a little disconcerting that he stopped in the second half of trying to do that. But in the first half, I really. Like that air ball didn't even bother me. And it's like a cringy because you don't like to see it happen. But overall, from a process standpoint, you really like to see it happen because if he's going to start just trying to do this, and he put up 7 shots in this game. If we can turn that into like 11 shots, like all at the rim, that does start to tip the needle for where the Nets offense really needs to be. So I thought just from just a comfort level and just from an overall fluidity level, it did look a lot better. He a great steal on Luka late in the game, basically saved the game for them. He was, started going to the basket, took one step to the right on Hardaway for a trailing Durant who flushed it home to send them to overtime. But I thought in general, his game here was better. And it's actually funny too with him. And it actually maybe because at this point, is Simmons a superstar, this version of him right now in the Nets? No. That's very obvious. He's a role player. I know he makes money like a superstar, but he's a role player on this team. This is one of these games where, partly because I think he played very well on defense and because the team seemed very locked in, the Nets actually won a bunch of areas that they usually lose. This is another reason that it kind of sucks to take the loss. They win the offensive rebound game. They win the turnover game, right? Like they win in places that have been problems for them over the course of the season. I think Simmons, to some degree had stuff to do with that. 3 offensive rebounds, 3 steals in this game. Mm-hmm. Like they were able to take advantage of sort of strengths that they had against a Mavericks squad that doesn't have a big center that's going to really kill you and all this other stuff. So I think him and sort of the rest of the non-Kyrie KD guys, there was max effort from them. And that is a good thing, right? Like they win. We're always complaining about all these areas the Nets lose in. They actually won. That's another thing. They actually won those areas in this game. And the Mavs just end up shooting 50% from 3, which is literally the difference. Like that is the difference of the game. The Mavs shot 50% from 3. A lot of them were great looks. So I'm actually not even going to call it luck. a lot of them were just totally wide open corner looks or Tim Hardaway foul line extended or above the break threes and stuff that were good. But there's going to be other games where that's 40% and the Nets win. You know what I mean? Like, and because they won in all these other areas. And I think Simmons was a huge part of that.
From it here. And we're back. Don't worry about that, friends. You got to love that Patty Mills gets 17 minutes here, right? The coaching staff, we're gonna lean into that number. We're gonna hope maybe for 19 minutes next game. Listen, we'll put that one on the back burner for right now. It's funny because Royce O'Neal shoots 2 of 8 from beyond the arc. It felt like it was 50%. Just like it felt like he had a couple of timely ones. Overall, I mentioned it earlier in the episode here that Royce really has shown how much his value is. And by comparison, while you mentioned you need a Joe Harris, you need a Seth Curry, you need this perimeter shooting because you can see 5 of 14 for Irving from beyond the arc. You get 2 of 5 from Kevin Durant. Nobody else really takes a lot outside of O'Neal because he understands my job is to be a 3-and-D guy here for this team. Now, what I've liked about him in the last couple of games is where is he better or what's the next level beyond a Bruce Brown last season? He's a better passer, right? He's better at getting into the lane and providing opportunities for his teammates. So there's a little bit more continuity with him. I continue to love what I'm seeing when he's on the floor. Only one of 4 players, if you include Simmons, which we have to, that were in the plus here in terms of plus minus. The other player was Yuta Watanabe, and this kind of falls into the category of different things, different looks. We'll come back in probably next week and see how these weekend games go with the Pacers, and do we see any more DDJ, who's, by the way, when the numbers do not help us, we want to ignore them. He was a minus 23 for whatever that's worth. But Yuta Watanabe, I think, showcased what his value is, right? Especially in the absence of those key perimeter shooters. Only took 2 outside looks, knocked them both down, though. He gives you the length. He does enough defensively. He started a little breakup strip on a baseline runner. I forget who it was for the Mavs that then Ben Simmons gathered and took the other way. So I think we are starting to see these offseason acquisitions that are on this roster. They're here for a reason, and you're seeing that they're a better functionality inside what you need. Now, again, like we're saying, if these were wins, it'd be a lot easier to point to these and say, look at their value. But I have to trust that getting these guys more involved in this process with consistency is going to matter. I don't know if Yuta goes away here when Seth and Harris are back. You assume, obviously, a large portion does. Said it last episode, I'll say it again. 17 minutes for Patty Mills. Give him to Yuta Watanabe and call it a day. Like, I think that he should be a part of a consistent rotation here, at least to see how far you can push him inside of this unit.
Yeah, first guy off the bench in the second half. I do think, and I like everything you see, like he's obviously super live on the ball. The effort is completely there. He wants to be an NBA rotation player. He's shot well from 3, probably, unsustainably hot for how few. I mean, he hasn't taken a ton of threes. I think he's
Luka
definitely
in the face with his armpit. It's all
he's
good.
He's earned minutes. I know you were kidding about Patty Mills a minute ago, but I think, but okay, good.
Clarification.
He should be taking those minutes. We've seen from a guy like him. I mean, clearly Harris and Curry, when they're back, should take the Mills minutes at this point. These guys should definitely be playing over Patty Mills, and Yuta is one of that group. I would put the Harris and Curry thing is obvious over Mills, but I would actually start putting Yuta in most matchups over Patty Mills. I will. One thing about guys like Yuta here, and I mean all these rotation players, I do sometimes with Nash get a feeling. This is a negative, a dig on Nash here. I get this are we just putting the ping pong balls in the hopper and that's who gets to play whatever kind of shoots out bingo style? Because there seems to be no rhyme or reason at times about some of these rotations. This is 2 games in a row where stuff. I mean, and maybe some are going to say this is multiple seasons in a row, but I think at least this year there's a group of personnel that even lines up the sort of as head scratching to be what's happening here. It wasn't as bad in this game. But they played 11 different. I went back and looked yesterday. They played 11 different lineups just in the first half against Milwaukee. That's frankly impossible. You just can't. That's what a rec league does when the parents start complaining that not all their kids are getting to play. This tonight wasn't as bad, but there is just a no rhyme or reason to some of these rotations. multiple non-shooter spots. All of a sudden, DDJ comes out and plays 1,000,000 minutes, which he was fine, I guess. I mean, was he fine? I don't even know.
He was 4. Yeah, and that's the weird part about him, right? You look at his line, 4 of 6, and gave you 5 rebounds. And just eye test wise, looked okay on the defensive end. But what was their real value, right? Was the real value?
My point is, if instead of just throwing the ping pong balls into the hopper and see who come, or picking a name out of a hat, which frankly I'm kidding, but it does feel like that sometimes. These lineups change so quickly. These random guys that haven't played are all of a sudden playing a lot of minutes. It's not even like a hot hand situation necessarily. These minutes should just start to settle down into a guy like Watanabe. 7 to 8 minutes of Sumner. Obviously, we know at this point Cam is totally buried, but there is like a herky jerkiness to the lineups right now, even worse than we've seen in the past. I think, and again, I think it kind of mostly worked out tonight, but I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think this version of it is sustainable. And this is all me agreeing with you about Yuta Watanabe. I think he should just be playing more. And sometimes I'm just super confused about the Mills minutes were atrocious. Why are we doing this?
And here's what I was going to say too, because so we know, right? You have Harris, then you don't have Harris. You have Morris to start. He's away for personal reasons right now, right? So you lose 2 of these guys, even without Seth Curry yet. So, and it's not giving Nash a pass because the track record is there where he kind of gets a little ballistic and just starts spraying players all over the court, to your point, with no real rhyme or reason, seemingly. But so it's there's a little bit there, at least in the early season. But as you mentioned it here, the one thing that he hasn't gotten away from is Patty Mills minutes. So, it's you're willing to stay consistent with this.
Could his name not come up? I don't know. Could we not just grab his name out of the hat? Is his name in there 18 times and everyone else is in there once?
You got to stop. You fill out one piece of paper with your name on it and we draw it each and every game. And that's I think what's more frustrating too, because if you're going to say you're willing to try different things, then there has to be a willingness that one of those things you try is not having Patty Mills play. Right. And then you get into some of these other guys. Frankly, while we have to admit that Cam is buried, I would have even rather have just seen a bunch of Cam Thomas minutes tonight, because who knows? But hopefully, as we move forward here, and by the way, over the course of this weekend, we'll close this one out. We're live on YouTube. We'll stick around for a little bit, not as long as we usually do, because this one obviously went long and late. But I will be getting on with Tony East from Locked On Pacers. We're going to talk about those matchups, back-to-back games there, which the Brooklyn Nets need to win both of. Let's just be clear. But hopefully, these last 2 games where you saw more Watanabe, you saw, reduced but consistent minutes for Edmund Sumner, get Harris back, right? And then have an 8-man rotation that makes sense and just go with it. Wins or losses, go with it and see where you are in another 5 games. And if it didn't work, make one adjustment. Don't make wholesale changes and don't make adjustments quarter to quarter, because I agree with you. There's a frustration around just feeling like I'm not sure what my preference may be of these rotations, but I really hate not feeling like the coaching staff has a sense of what their preference would be.
It just doesn't seem like it, right? It just doesn't seem like it when there's just this many variations. And then again, those variations disappear when the second half comes, right? This is the other part. Yeah. This is the other part where it's kind of maybe not a plan, is that these throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what stick lineups. Nothing ends up sticking really, or things that would have been obvious to have stuck, they come up stuck in the second half. So this is taking Nash to task. I don't get it. This is 2 games in a row. I don't understand. And we'll talk, let's break out of here. We'll talk more about this on YouTube Live for sure. If all of you are listening on the podcast, make sure you're over on YouTube, subscribe. We saw a bunch of subscriber jumps here over the last couple of days. Really appreciate everyone that's coming along for the ride. Tons of people in here for the YouTube Live. Also, we'll be doing one again on Saturday evening following the Pacers game also. So we're trying to get in here every single game after. So make sure you're subscribed to YouTube. You get those notifications for when we're going to go live. Subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe on YouTube as well.
Sports is an open exhibition of overweening ambition, courage deflated by stupidity, skill soured by the whiff of arrogance. Alistair Cook.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. We will be back again next week. Oh, no. Yeah, next week. Talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
The Post Podcast Live. Thank you, everybody who is in on the comments, having the conversation. As we always like to say, throw up the @LockedOn if you have a question. Let's set some guidelines here, friends. Don't talk to me about a stretch big. We will not be acknowledging or answering those questions. And maybe don't talk to me about how Ben Simmons is trash or fire Steve Nash. Those are things we don't want to talk about. But things about this game we're willing to entertain. Maybe we're getting a little edgy in our post-podcast shows here. It could just be me, Doug.
Oh no, I will. No, I don't think it's being edgy. I think some of these things we just go back and listen to previous podcasts.
Yes,
we just covered this.
This
is well-tread earth, right? Like this is the tires are very thin on the treads here with this. So if you want takes on this stuff, it's not for ignoring it. It's just for spending too much time on it. Just go check out other podcasts.
Now, one thing that we didn't cover there in the episode. Yeah.
Can I throw this one? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. And then there was someone that Hector just threw up a question that I want to.
Yeah, let's go right to it. We can come back. Yeah.
Yeah, because this one we had a note on, and I just didn't think it was going to be part of the show because it wasn't going to flow correctly. Mm-hmm. So what do you think about the timeout right after the goaltending? It's horrible. It's horrible. Like to take this timeout in this spot, to not have two separate plays drawn up here, a defensive scheme drawn up here, and just an ATO that even is just like vanilla that you can run, like to be so caught off guard. I don't even know what's caught off guard. I don't even know what it is. To take a timeout here when you need Richard Jefferson, good for him, blew him up on the telecast.
Need a guy like that. No F's given for Richard Jefferson when he's watching.
Good for him. He's right. He's right. It's horrible. This is multiple games where we've seen just like really bad decision making with frankly the basics, like when it comes to coaching, the rolling the ball up with the jaw piece against Memphis, where he just clearly doesn't know the rules. Like that is. It's not the reason they lost the game, but like it sure doesn't help. Like you just can't in these games. You know, when we're talking about I should have just said this in the main podcast. When you're talking about like the little things not going your way, the other thing you cannot do in these close games is like shoot yourself in the foot even a little bit. Like you can't graze your toe with these mistakes because it will cost you. Like not running 7 seconds off the clock to not foul. Like near the end, all this other stuff. No, so Hector, I jumped over Adam because I didn't want to forget this. The timeout piece was horrible. Yeah, that's it. There's nothing else to say about it.
That's it. Horrible. No, and it's true. Well, I'll go ahead and highlight this one here real quick because I can store it away. I won't forget the point that I wanted to make. I think, and this comes in from Khan here. I think that these next 5 games will tell us what's really going on with this team. If they need big minutes from Kevin Durant and Kyrie to win, there needs to be some more significant changes. Now, again. What you don't have to answer this, but define significant minutes. Like if you mean that for when we're talking about specifically here coming up against the Pacers, should Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving need to be on the floor for the back end last 5 to 6 minutes of the fourth quarter? No, they shouldn't. So that means their minutes should be somewhere closer to 30 than to 38, closer to 32 than to 37, whatever it may look like. But again, even in those games, even in blowout games, I'm not going to sweat the rep count here yet at this point. Again, until you start winning basketball games, there's kind of no reason for anyone to come off. Now, if they start to win these over it, then you can reevaluate. But until you have a consistent winning mentality where you are burying teams when your superstars are on the court, we don't know yet what this second unit looks like and who is going to be capable of picking up that mantle and burying teams so that they don't have to come back out there on the court. So I think there's always going to be a balance act there until you see this consistency from the team, the rotations like we talked about, because otherwise what you'll end up having is let's sit down Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, have them get nice and cold, and then have to pull them back in to make sure we close the door on teams.
Yeah, I agree. I was kind of like team rest here going, or at least thinking about it going into this game, because I do think it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm also with you that like, hey, you can't die with these losses. So like, or you're just going to die with the losses and it's not going to rest all you want and don't make the playoffs. So I can probably see both sides of that one. I do think actually, so one reason, it's funny. One reason I am a proponent of rest is actually another anti-Steve Nash thing here, is that where going into this game, I was like, sometimes these guys just need to be saved from themselves, right? They just can't help themselves.
Facts.
They can't help themselves in the close games. They just fire these guys back in for max minutes because they want to win. I get it. So sometimes like the commitment to resting a game just saves everybody from a really poor decision. Like you saw this with Kawhi, why he was coming off the bench. Zion, you saw this a couple of years ago when they were trying to manage him. When you bring him off the bench, you just automatically make it so he just can't play those 6 minutes, right? Like you save everybody from themselves. Yeah. And so that was where I was kind of like with the rest. Now with tonight, they actually did it. They actually kept KD on a 35-minute like rotation. They were going, and then it went to overtime.
Yep.
Like they did it. They kept him on the bench longer. He was only going to play 35 minutes and like it was going to be like 35 and a half minutes. He was going to play 35 and a half minutes in this game. They had done it. And even in a close game, they resisted the urge to bring him back in and run him like 38. And then it goes to overtime and he still plays the 41. So I do think that like the rest and the miles management is important. The other 100%. Well, I would be interested to hear your opinion on this. I do think the other key to this is they have to, at some point, and it really is going to rely on Harris and Curry being back, and hopefully they're back and healthy together. At some point, they just have to run Simmons and shooter lineups without KD and Kyrie. Like they have to steal 5 minutes a game like that. They have to steal 6 minutes a game of those lineups. That is the other key, I think, for this whole season, honestly, is that like, right now they can't live at all without one of those two guys on the court.
Yep.
They have to get to a point where Simmons can be on the court with shooters. If they can't get to that point, I don't think actually we ever see it change. I
100%. When we're talking about, I 100% agree with you, because when we're talking about how Ben Simmons looks offensively, it's not just about how potent can the starting five be for this team. It's about exactly the point that you're making. How can we get Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving off the court and still be a dynamic offensive team? And when you think about what the starting five has been to start the year, and you think about some of these other pieces, so to your point about, hey, we can always have a Seth Curry, always have a Joe Harris there with Ben Simmons. And I'm not doing this because I'm a fan of Yuta, but a player like him with his skill set, all of a sudden in that starting lineup, well, we can take Nicholas Claxton out. We can bring in Yuta if we want. Keep the rest of the starting five with Royce O'Neal. Then you're going to rotate in a Seth Curry or a Joe Harris and bring out Royce O'Neal. Now that second unit, when you take out KD and Kyrie, it's still going to have one of those two shooters on the outside. You're still going to have defensive presence out there, and you can flex some of these other guys that are showing themselves capable of playing from the outside and still giving you length. So the balance between these rotations matters, and Ben Simmons needs to be the bridge here because of what his versatility is on both ends of the floor. So yeah, and again, we're 5 games in, and we had, wouldn't you know it, the Brooklyn Nets aren't 100% healthy. Isn't that a theme we could talk about for a decade? And Doug will come back in off his mute, and he'll talk to me about this. He'll share his thoughts.
I had a dog barking in the background here. No, what I was gonna say was one more thing. And sometimes this stuff is just a numbers game, and by the numbers I mean money. So when you make
too much money,
when you have 40+ million tied into a player that can't play on the court by himself, you are in huge trouble as a team. Like the math is easy. There's a salary cap. You can't really go too far beyond some of the top end numbers. And talent is almost always monetarily driven. Like you just can't, unless you have sat at the beginning of the draft, and this happens from a couple year stretch. If you sat at the beginning of the draft for like 5 straight years and just luck boxed your way into just, superstars that you're not paying out the nozzle for, otherwise your best players are going to make a ton. If you have tied up tons of salary into guys who can't carry the team for long stretches, the match just isn't going to work. There's no one left. Like you can't just pick up. There's not going to be a minimum guy. I mean, it's rare. Like Dennis Smith Jr. is looking good here in Charlotte. Point being, it's very rare that you're going to be able to just find some guy off the scrap heap at the minimum that's going to be able to carry your team for long stretches. So the math just doesn't work. Like you need a guy that makes that much money to be able to do it. I think he can. I'm a Ben believer here. Maybe I don't know how that's going to age, but that's just the key here for what needs to happen for him.
Just a quick side note coming in from Maine talking about whatever for potential. I wanted to make sure we added in TJ Warren. While again, you can't put a weight of expectation on him, worry to come back and be healthy and productive. He's a great guy that can help you bridge this gap here and provide some offensive firepower with Ben Simmons in a second unit that could help you have a little bit of that balance.
I want to be really clear about this. I think everyone needs to temper their excitement, whatever it is around TJ Warren. The guy hasn't played in 2 years, and he's being he's not coming back in November. He's being reevaluated in November.
We've had that experience specifically with the Brooklyn Nets on players.
There is a very key difference in those words, and I think everyone needs to really tune into this about TJ Warren. It is not expected to return in November. It is, hey, we're going to see how it's going in November. Now, on the flip side of that, I tweeted something about TJ Warren the other day that said basically nothing's going to happen for him, and he liked the tweet. And then I was like, well, okay, that actually started making me believe maybe that if Locked On Nets has become a little bulletin board material for TJ Warren, I'm all here for that too. I will keep on this because I want him to come back and play and be really good. So TJ Warren, if you're listening, thanks for liking the tweet. Want you to play, buddy. Just
Ben
want to temper
Ben Simmons is not going to start developing his 3-point shot.
Yeah.
I wanted to
Simmons will probably do that from a burner, so I don't know. Warren's was from his real account.
It was direct. The other thing I wanted to just pull this up real quick here, saying, do you think Kyrie Irving does a good job as point guard? I think he's a great shooting guard. I'm only bringing. He's not
a he's a shooting guard. He's not. A point.
Yeah, and I'm only bringing it up to tie back into what this flexibility looks like. The one thing I'll say is in this game, and this is more just observational because we understand you corrected the way I'd phrased this going back weeks on the episode where I said Kyrie Irving wants to play off ball until it's time for him to be on ball, right? But there were sequences in this game, specifically late in the game, when it was, let's get Ben Simmons, and we talked about this, get Ben Simmons out in space, let him be ready to crash the boards, to get offensive rebounds, to get easy looks, putbacks, and Kyrie Irving was orchestrating and setting up, not just his own shot, not playing ISO, but setting things up and trying to find good looks, little two-man game at times, like we saw a couple games ago with Royce O'Neal, like we saw with Kevin Durant. So again, there is value here. The question that I'll actually pose to you is, do you think in trying to find that flexibility, if you had to pair Ben more with one or the other, would you rather him be on the court with Kevin Durant for more minutes over the course of a game or Kyrie Irving? Like, what do you think would benefit Ben the best?
I think they both do in different ways. I'm going to amend what I said. I'm going to answer this, but I'm going to amend one thing I just said. I called him a shooting guard. That's not correct. I would call it, but I wouldn't call him a point guard either. I would call him a high usage guard. I think that's like a slight difference because it's not an archetype he's not like a Klay Thompson archetypical shooting guard. And he's not who's a point guard? James Harden. I don't know, what the exact version of this is now. He's a high usage guard. Like that's what he is. And the implication is he's going to take a lot of shots. His game is predicated on taking lots of shots.
Let's use cliche terms. Shot creator, right? Offensive dynamic weapon.
He's a guard. He's a guard and he's a guard that takes a lot of shots. He's not going to just facilitate a lot of offense that's going to, just make a lot of other guys better. In terms of who runs it better, I think it's different. I don't know. Like I can see both sides of it. I don't have a good answer for that one. I think they're both fine. Yeah, I mean, they both can be great. They both can be great. It's just not. I don't think I would pick one over the other.
That's fair. Way to dodge it. No, I'm kidding. I'm just throwing this up quickly here because Jonathan Brown saying we're finally getting more minutes out of Yuta. It's a good sign. I'm grasping at straws here. I think there's a little bit of that too. Early days in this season, you see something you like, you start to try to lean into it. I disagree in the sense of
his net rating is sick, and it's actually going to be even better after this game.
You need not call it straws, Jonathan. You're grasping at something that's real and tangible, and is a good sign.
Let me see if this is updated here. He had an offensive rating of 150, and that's at a 156 offensive rating he was on the court this season. You say something else, and I'll pull this up while we're looking at it.
You say something else. It's the way we work in tandem on the show. Back in what do you all think is the breaking point as far as coaching? Because we know Nash is terrible, but Vaughn didn't do any better against the Bucks. Touche. It didn't exactly get improved there. Somebody in national media called this out as if the Nets lost this game, Steve Nash would be fired on Friday. And by the way, that's what you call a hot take. That's what you call the old hot take, and it doesn't have to have any substance.
That's interesting that someone would say that, though. I don't know. Don't even bother saying it. I do find that interesting. I'm with you that it's a hot take, and I'm sure it's just meant to just grab clicks, and I get it. Can I give not my theory on that, but my theory on how it would go were things they continue to not go right. Yeah.
I don't think, and I'm not saying that he shouldn't be, I don't think that Steve Nash gets fired. I think what happens first, if it all goes off the rails, is, and I'm not saying this is on the horizon here, it's everybody gets traded. Everybody gets traded.
Such a mistake.
And then you ride it out with, and then you ride out Steve Nash for this year, knowing that he's going to be fired as well. Because now it's over, right? Now the rebuild is over. But that's what I think would be the process of it, just based on the steps that have occurred here in the off season. And I'm sure someone will come. This is the way it works. Someone will say Adam thinks that the Nets should choose Steve Nash over the superstars. That's not what I'm saying. I just think that they have made an active choice this is our team. This is our coach. These are our players. If it's not going to work, then it's not in totality going to work. And at that point, it really doesn't matter whether or not when you fire or who you trade first or whatever, it's all going to get stripped down to the nuts and bolts. And at that, I just think that, I don't know, organizationally, it just seems like if you were going to fire Steve Nash, you would have done it 2 years ago if you weren't satisfied with him. So it's hard for me to think that he's going to somehow become the lame duck of this, because it's already universally from the outside looking in that, Steve Nash has always been a problem. Well, okay. Does it, if you didn't feel differently about it a year ago, why would you feel differently 5 games into this season? And you now have Ben Simmons there, and it's clear that he's not fully where he needs to be as a player. So again, it's not an excuse for the coaching staff, but we've done this with Kevin Durant, with Kyrie Irving, the iterations of the team. And we've gone and said, well, they were never fully healthy. He never had all of his complement of players around him, right? That's why they couldn't go as deep. So if you're going to make the excuses for the players, which I think is valid, then I'll make at least some level of excuse, though it's a far, far smaller margin for Steve Nash.
I do find it interesting that you said that someone in the national media, even as a hot takes, even floated that idea, because we have really not heard that. Like, that is one thing we have never really heard.
Going to hear that,
I wouldn't be shocked.
So what does it look like next year? Like, I mean, the Nets are 1-4. They've got some.
If they were like 2-10, they have to. He has to be fired. It's a no brainer. I don't even know. But
what about what
the thought process would be?
I wouldn't even disagree on it. I wouldn't disagree at all. But what about these first 4 games? We talked about some head scratching rotations here, timeout usage. Has anything in these first 5 games been something where you would say these losses are on the coaching staff, on Steve Nash, as opposed to, at least this season, Ben Simmons just doesn't look like he knows what's up on offense right now. And that's the biggest. The biggest piece is we have one of our third best player is playing like our 6th best player, and that's going to make it impossible for us to consistently win games.
Okay, I think we can point to enough things that have been problems early on in the season that are coaching related that look, and you know us, like, we've not really tread down this path too much. I mean, Matt Brooks and I talked about it a little bit. We've kind of avoided the Nash firing piece, mostly because I just didn't think it was going to happen and whatever. Yeah. I do think that there are warning signs here that would warrant a move, maybe, if things continued. A couple things. If it became clear that Nash was not able to draw anything out of Simmons to move the needle on it, that would be, we'd have to start.
Yeah, ironically, right.
We'd have to start talking about, like, the coach's job is to move these things, move the needle on this stuff. And if that's not going to work, that would be 1. 2 would be, I'm not sure we've ever seen like a good enough. I mean, they're clearly running offense. Like, Matt Brooks does a great job with this. He's been doing post-game threads where he's just running through a bunch of plays. Go watch these. They're really instructive into, like, the Nets clearly are running tons and tons of actions. Like, that's just clear. They are running an offense. Like,
and he highlights where players are making where the players are making the mistakes.
And he also highlights where the scheme doesn't make any sense, right? Mm-hmm. I do think that this, like, rotational sort of weirdness that is happening right now with things that would seem to be very obvious about who and should and shouldn't be playing, even among the group that they have, is sort of warning signs. I think these little in-game mistakes. I'm just saying, if I'm starting to make the list and we were at this point, I think it's a totally reasonable conversation to have.
By the way,
because there is no world where Steve Nash should be kept in favor of trading these other guys, if that ended up being the problem.
And I don't. Okay, and let me not that. And I, first of all, I agree with you. You get to a certain point, the list is long enough. It doesn't matter. You're fired. The point, and we'll move on just to have a full conversation here, because I think this is far off in the distance. At least, far enough off in the distance.
I don't know, man. We're 1-4. I'm just saying,
with the way these next set of games go, we'd like to think it'll be further off than closer. My more point was just, at a certain point, it won't matter if you fire him first or you fire him second. I think at a certain point, it's going to be, this is not going to work out. And whether it's, and this is, I'll let you behind the curtain a little bit here. Doug and I, we've had just text conversations, the frustrations of the early season, where I said, tongue in cheek, but there's been a moment here, the start of the season, where I go, I don't entirely know if the organization and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving and everybody involved in Brooklyn just totally duped me in the offseason, convinced me that they all came back to the table. They all calmed down. We're all going to make this work, as opposed to let's all calm down and wait until we can sort this out. And those are two very different things. And it's not unreasonable to think with expectation that a player like Kevin Durant might say, I'm playing 35 to 40 minutes a game. I'm doing my thing. It's not working out. This is why I made the request that I did. You guys brought in other players. It's still not working out. Now, to your point, the first thing you might say is, let's change the coach. The weird part about that would be they just brought in Igor, and he is a close tie to Steve Nash. Jacques Vaughn, who was once the head coach, stayed on the staff. It would be a pretty seismic shift. And I'm not saying it wouldn't make sense to do it, but it'd be a seismic shift. It wouldn't be fire the head coach and promote somebody else. You'd be probably clearing out the entire staff 12 games into a season and completely rebooting who's going to be running this team, which would just be, again, the writing on the wall piece about how stuff like this usually doesn't pan out. I would be bells and whistles. My hair would be on fire. I'd be losing my mind at that point.
Yeah. I didn't think this was going to turn into a national discussion. I guess my point is, unlike other I'm more willing to entertain it now. Like I thought like it would just never happen because I just thought organizationally it was kind of a moot point. I just didn't think
that's a big part of the way I look at it too.
And I was like, I just don't even know what the point is here. Like clearly they're not going to go this route. I do think now we're far enough down the rabbit hole. Being 1-4 doesn't start. And by the way, this isn't even me like tearing my hair out, freaking out about a 1-4 start. I'm actually really not freaked out about the 1-4 start. Yeah. I just don't. I think this has been a really tough 5 games, and I think that in terms of like my panic meter, it's not going.
Where's
crazy.
Your panic meter, Pete?
It's pretty low. I'm not panicking. I think the season's long. There's plenty of time to work this out. I think it's worth talking about, like thinking about what it looks like 10 games from now. And if it looks like this, like at that point, you'd have to have a change, and the change cannot be to trade the players. Like that's my only point. I just don't want to entertain the trade the players part. I don't think that would be ridiculous because we've seen nothing. I don't think we've seen anything from Nash to warrant even if the thing you stand up on is you've never gotten a full shake. That's just not good enough for a coach.
That's fine. No, that's fine. And by the way, you could fire Steve Nash tomorrow as a la hot take central, and in another 20 games, like it's like, and you could still take a lot of things off. I would never take this thing getting blown up this season fully off the table based on where we stand and what could happen as we go along here. Right.
Marcelo put a panic meter if they lose to the Pacers.
So by the way, very high, dangerously high. By the way, let's do this because you said, as we talked about, 15 to 20 game sample size, and we'll go from there, right? Yes. So they've got these 2 games against the Pacers. They're going to have the Bulls. That's a 3-game, what will effectively be a 4-game homestand with this loss to Dallas here. They'll go on the road for Washington, Charlotte, and Dallas, and then they'll have home game against the Knicks. That is 3, 6, 7, 8 would be at the Clippers, at the Lakers, and then at the Kings. That is 10 games. Those are all road games. That would be 10. To your point, I've got at least 4, 5, 6. I'm going to say a minimum of 6 wins. More likely, I would want 7. If I don't get 6 to 7 wins over the next 10 games based on who they're playing, we're going to start to get into some murky waters. Because if you're telling me 15 games into the season, you're a 5 or 6 win team, there's real problems. And the first thing is going to be head coach is going to roll. But I'm also going to, again, this is why I'm trying to compartmentalize them, because it's like, I don't love Steve Nash. I could take or leave Steve Nash as the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets. And also, just based on roster and the talent, it's really hard for me to not see this team winning basketball games based on the talent alone at a certain point. So when you look at some of these, I'm going to call them
Pacers are the ultimate test. The Pacers are the ultimate test of this. The Pacers want to lose. Like they are trying to lose. Like if you watch it all, what the Pacers are doing with their players and their minutes this season, it's so clear that they have no intention of winning, which they shouldn't, because they're in the Wembanyama sweepstakes, and that's what they should be doing. Except for Halliburton, everyone else, they do their own ping pong ball thing, except the ping pong balls are always trying to come out with like, put in a nice effort, but let's make sure we never have like our best 5 rolling the whole time. We are not interested really in winning these games. Like the Nets have to, and I think they're going to win both games. So I don't think it's going to be a problem.
I'll go a step further. They got to win both those games, and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving cannot play over 34 minutes. I'll put it reasonably.
Yeah, they can't be dogs.
This can't be down to the wire.
Although,
this can't be buzzer beater time.
Right now, the Nets have the third worst point differential in the league this year. The only teams that are worse are the Pacers are better than them. The only teams that are worse are the Pistons and the Magic are close. Like that, it has not been a good start. Even with the a Simmons coming back, and even with the Harris and Curry injuries, and even with the 5 games against playoff teams, which, like you said, no other team had to face this kind of thing. It's still there's still troubling signs, even when you factor in all that other stuff, right? And this is just being realistic. It's not even negative. It's just, this is the numbers. These are the numbers right now. I'm not quoting anything else. I'm just saying this is what the numbers are. Like, the numbers are, they're minus 8.6 point differential for the year. The defense going into this game was dead last by absolute country mile. And these are just not what great teams usually do.
We should get out of here in a minute, because now I feel like we're going down. I'm very happy to be doing it. Sometimes it's fun. It's better to keep this off the full podcast, down a bit of a rabbit hole here. But I
don't think it's bad. I don't think it's bad to talk about this stuff.
It's bad for me mentally. Stuff. It's just bad for me mentally.
Oh, gotcha.
As someone who wants the team to do well. But all those stats that you're lying out too, again, I'm like, whatever the responsibility is on one component, I keep just looking at the court. Remember the other day when you go, Kevin Durant, net negative. He's the second worst plus minus ratio on this team. Now they're losing all these games, and there's factors.
No, he wasn't plus minus. He was going to this game the worst in the NBA. After the last game,
even over
the worst. Right. The worst plus minus of qualified players in the NBA. Now, look, is that going to continue the whole season? Of course not. Of course not. Like, he's just too good. But these are just the numbers that when you see them, you're like, oh baby.
It's all freaking me out, man. Let's just go sweep the Pacers for 2 games.
I'm not freaked out. I think this is all interesting. It all makes for good stuff. And we'll get out on this. Everyone needs to be very clear about something. No one wants the Nets to win more than Adam and I. Adam and I are fans of the Nets. We cover the Nets in our own fashion here, like on the podcast, whatever. Also, it's just like the clearest one-to-one with having a success in the NBA and with podcasting is with your team winning. Like, that's it. It's very, especially with the Nets. Just because of the way the market is and everything like that. That's just a little behind the curtain. Like, it's so clear. Just from that standpoint, we want the team to win. That's why the other reason I want to be positive about the team, because it's obvious. Like, it's better for the podcast when the Nets win. That's not rocket science. So anyway, that's the last thing I'll say.
By the way, and let's get out of here. Friendly reminder, one, that in spite of the fact that the Brooklyn Nets are 1-4, we appreciate everybody showing up for the post-game lives. We will be in on Saturday night with a post-game live following that Pacers game. So you can come see that here and then catch that on the Monday morning podcast feed if you miss us live and you're driving around, you want to tell your friends, you listen to the show, all that good stuff. So be sure to be a part of that. And there'll be a little bit of a bonus conversation with me and Tony East from Locked On Pacers, talking about that matchup and me trying to explain to him why, even though we're 1-4, we're going to dumpster them over these next 2 games. You find us on social media at Doug Norrie, at Adam Armbrecht, at Locked On Nets. That's always good too. Give us a follow over there. I have all kinds of hilarious quips, and Doug is very insightful.
Don't DM me with things like Nets suck. I get a lot of those. Like, it's not like,
do you?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I gotta tell you, man, a lot of my DMs, and compliments to the fans out there, I get DMs like, hey man, love the podcast, was just curious. And then they lay out like a question for me, and I have a great interaction. So keep up. Let me just say this. If you're going to structure it one way or the other, keep sending Nets suck to Doug, and just have good conversations with me. That's kind of that's where I feel comfortable.
Yeah, it's just like, I was going to read a couple, but I won't do it. Like, the last one was Nets are not good. I just got a random one from somebody just telling me to let me know.
Fair.
Nets
Hold on,
wait,
ready? Nash stinks. See, you can send someone like that to Doug. Doug would like to get that in a DM.
Third quarter, Nets stink. Like, I don't know. These are the messages. These are the messages that I get. So just send me something on Twitter that's not that. I want to be EV positive in my own positivity. That's what I'm looking for. All right, appreciate everyone jumping in here. I don't think Nash is going to be fired, so that wasn't the conversation. But it's just
we by the way opened up a nice little door for everyone just to burst their way through and start pulling on this strike. Okay. We'll deny it on the podcast. We'll see you guys Saturday night and all next week. Of course, always talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Take it easy.